Welcome to episode 20 of Red Lens, a political photography podcast. I started this podcast in 2022. It's taken me a while, but I'm excited to finally get to the 20th episode. That said, I'm trying to decide whether to keep Red Lens going or not. This occasion of the 20th episode has me thinking about the future of the podcast and considering whether to possibly put the podcast on hiatus. The reality is that it's a pretty niche podcast with a pretty small audience. I know some people are listening, and I really appreciate when I hear feedback from people who have listened. But when I look at the numbers, the truth is it gets very few listens and not that much engagement. And while I got some supporters on Patreon at first, and that has helped some, it was never really that much, and I haven't gotten any new Patreon supporters in a long time. This is a labor of love, so I'm not doing it for the clicks or the likes or the money. But it does take time and effort, so I'm wondering if it's the best use of my time. I'd like to know what you think. Should I keep Red Lens going or not? Let me know what you think by commenting on the episode on your favorite podcast platform of choice. With that question now hanging out there in the air, let's get right into the interview for episode 20. Today's interview is with someone who I've gotten to know and do political organizing with here in the Twin Cities over the last several years. And as we've gotten to know each other, it became clear that in addition to activism, we have some other things in common as well. One of those things, of course, is photography, which this podcast is about. Another one is that we're both interested in and have been part of the punk or hardcore music scene. And I'm sure maybe some other things will come up through this conversation as well. So welcome to Red Lens Podcast, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.
So you're a photographer who's become pretty omnipresent with your camera at protests in the Twin Cities. Tell me your story of how you got into photography. When did you start taking photos at protests and just in general?
So I started taking pictures in, I would say it was probably 2007. I don't know. I don't even remember when or why, other than I started to go to school for photography. And it was because my mom told me I needed to go to college. And the only thing that was interesting to me was photography at the time. So I started at community college. And of course, it was black and white film, 1, 2, whatever, 3, and, you're developing it yourself, all of that really fun stuff. Mostly taking pictures of my friends. And then it got really boring. And I think it was because
What?
I think it was because it was for school and I had to do these really just like projects that I was not inspired by. It was just really not interesting to me at all. So I did that for a couple of years and then I stopped, and I was a long time before I picked up a camera again.
I had no idea that you went to college for photography. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And worked in the darkroom, film. Amazing.
I don't remember any of it, but yep. Mm-hmm.
I also took one photography class in college, and the project I did for that was taking pictures at a fish market, and so it was interesting, I guess. But yeah, I get what you're saying. What I was really doing is using the darkroom to take pictures at shows, and then I would come and develop develop the rolls and print a few photos from shows. But yeah, I can see how if it's just school, it could be boring, I guess.
I have this picture and I'm going to have to show it to you. I have it printed and wasn't able to bring it home from Ohio recently because it was too heavy to fit in my suitcase, my portfolio. And it's a self-portrait, but it is a picture of my super worn out Vans on the sidewalk in front of my mom's house. And it is just like probably the most cliche thing I've ever seen. But it was 2007, so what can you do?
I love that. Okay. So yeah, you take pictures at a lot of protests, and you're not just sort of there as a neutral journalist to document something without any bias, in that you're also a dedicated organizer and activist yourself. So why don't you talk a little bit about your political activism? Like, what issues and organizations are you involved with organizing around, and what got you down that rabbit hole of political organizing?
So I have history of organizing within the anti-war movement, as well as currently the reproductive rights movement. I started specifically with the Minnesota Anti-War Committee in, I think it was 2021. 2020 happened, the pandemic, the uprising. We're from Minneapolis, we're from the Twin Cities. We were in the middle of it, and I wasn't connected at the time, and I didn't know what to do or like where to turn. And it took me a while, out of a series of joining other organizations that didn't quite do it for me, weren't really what I was looking for,
Hmm.
those who will not be named. And then I found the anti-war committee and I found community and I found people who really invested in my activism and were really interested in building me up. So I did that for a while, and then Roe v. Wade happened. The overturning of Roe v. Wade happened, the Dobbs decision. And at that time, we, as a community, mobilized a bunch of different organizations and we started a coalition, the Minnesota Abortion Action Coalition. And that was, I mean, you know this, folks from immigrant rights, labor, anti-war, people doing anti-police crimes work, all coming together to mobilize under, this monumental overturning of abortion access, abortion rights.
Hmm.
And I was doing both of them for a while. And one of them was, temporary until it started to really pick up and we realized, okay, this is kind of a big deal. This is kind of a crisis. And the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee or coalition became the committee. And we started to do that more permanently. And I moved from doing anti-war work into doing reproductive justice work, which for me is a little bit closer to home because I've worked with people who've experienced sexual and domestic violence for over 15 years now. And totally did not answer your question about how I started taking pictures at protests. So we can,
That's totally fine. Yeah, maybe loop back to that then.
sure. So I didn't pick up a camera again until my partner's grandparents both passed away within about a month of each other. I want to say it was the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And we were cleaning out the house in February of 2023. And I found this old, like decrepit looking, super heavy metal film camera, the black and silver kind, the very classic looking. And I found out that it was his grandpa's and that he, when he was serving in the Navy, he would have it with him and he took a bunch of pictures on it. And I really felt connected to that. And
Mm.
I really would have loved to have been able to keep it, but it went with a different member of the family. And unfortunately, I didn't take a picture of it to know exactly which camera it
Mm.
was because I've been dreaming of getting it tattooed on me because it's been that significant. And so from there, I started to thrift cameras until I found one that worked for me and started taking pictures of my friends and then just started bringing a camera to protests. And I borrowed film is expensive. You know this, Brad. Film's expensive. So I borrowed a mirrorless camera from work at the time and started to play around with that. Those are also expensive. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah. And the
Uh,
lenses even more so.
oh my goodness. I was thrifting film lenses and using an adapter
Yep.
and using a manual film lens on the mirrorless camera, which I am still relearning all of the technicalities. So that was an adventure until my partner surprised me with my camera one day, just randomly, about a year later. So I would
Mm.
say February 2024 surprised me with my Canon and kind of just took off from there. And the reason I started taking photos at protests, I'm going to be honest, is I think you had a different job at the time and you were very busy and there was a gap and I was having a lot of fun and filled in that gap a little bit. And that turned out to be, I don't know, it's been over a year later and it's been quite the journey.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had a very similar experience with using old film lenses with an adapter with my digital camera because you can get like I had a 70 to 200 millimeter, I think that was f4, maybe it was 2.8 lens that I got for under $100, and whereas the similar digital lens, that's made for the modern cameras be like a couple $1,000s, so that's what I did for quite a while. Yeah, I just used that and manual focus at protests and stuff, but it's fun, but and it works, and sometimes you get cooler pictures that way too, actually, with the old lenses. Yeah, so you've been taking pictures at a lot of protests since then. I'd love to hear maybe some stories if there's anything that stands out, like one or two or a few stories of some of the most impactful things that you've photographed at protests.
Sure. I'll share the most impactful and then I think one of my favorite stories. So it was May 2024. We'd been doing a lot of Palestine organizing after October 7th, and in particular had been working with a lot of students, Palestinian students at the university, doing just all of this like round the clock organizing. And they had been organizing encampments, they had been organizing occupations, they had been just doing all of this incredible work. And graduation was coming. My partner was graduating at the time too, so this was kind of giving me like a foot in the door to, be there. And I was planning on just taking some pictures of graduation, but I knew that there was like a disruption happening, of course, as there should be. My mom was with me, so she's in the crowd sitting with me, and we're very excited to watch my partner graduate. It's like this really important special occasion, and it's already very emotional, right? But there's just a ton of students in the crowd they've got keffiyehs on, they've got their like Palestine scarves. Then they start to walk across the stage and they've brought pillowcases that have messages on them, Free Palestine, like divest from genocide, divest from apartheid. And they are walking across stage and coming across the big screen. And it's just like really powerful. People are cheering. It is already getting like just emotions are heightened. And I will say, I have my favorite lens is my 70 to 200. And I forgot the adapter for it because I have the Canon EOS RP, which takes the RF, and then my lens is the EF, and I forgot the adapter. So I had used the kit lens, and I was not close to the stage. And so the pictures that I walked away with, they're not my most proud, but they definitely have so much emotion attached to them that I'm so grateful that what I got. But the most impactful part for me was watching one of our student organizers walk across the stage, and I knew that she had lost over a dozen members of her family in Palestine, in Gaza. And just the entire like arena, gymnasium, whatever, just like erupted when her name was announced and she was on the stage. And I'm like sitting in the crowd with my camera, and I'm like crying. My mom doesn't understand. She has no idea. And so I'm just like, this is really emotional. This is really powerful. And I hadn't even really intended to be there to take pictures of anything like that. I just wanted to take pictures of my friends graduating and doing this, having this experience, but it turned into so much more of a big thing. Throughout it all, despite it all, they still managed to have this like significant accomplishment, but also that accomplishment means so little to people when their family is being just like murdered, right? But it still felt so powerful to be able to watch these young people walk across the stage and just receive this roar of appreciation and love from the crowd. I don't think I'll ever forget that.
And you said that wasn't even an event where you went as wearing your photographer hat, like to be there to photograph the moment. You just,
Right.
it speaks in favor of always have a camera with you, no matter what,
Yep. Maybe bring your adapter and be a little bit more prepared, but
That's amazing. What do you have any other protests you'd want to talk about?
Mhm. So I mentioned this is my favorite one. You'll know this one. The students were doing the encampment at the University of Minnesota, the Gaza Solidarity Encampment. I believe it was like, oh God, and April 2024. I have no idea. Time just does not. I knew that a disruption was happening. We knew that they were going to be going in the middle of the night just by working alongside these student organizers, that they were going to be setting up this encampment in the wee hours. We thought we had more time. We thought we had more time to, maybe get some sleep and then grab some coffee and meet up there in the morning. We get a call, my partner and I, we're in bed. We get a call at 6 a.m. and it's like they've been given the 20-minute dispersal order. I have never gotten dressed so fast. Grabbed everything. We like hightailed it to campus. And this is one of like the first, it's on the list of one of the first things I was photographing at the time because I was still really new with my camera. So I just have this memory of running across, what is it, Northrop that we ran across, like that concrete area, and I just see I'm just fiddling with my camera, getting my lens together because I can see that they're already being hauled out of their tents by the police.
Wow.
And I missed the first couple of people, but I'm able to like start grabbing shots, and they see me. They know I'm gonna be there, so they start to make eye contact with me. And our beloved Mira from Mirac, and at the time from the Students for a Democratic Society, makes eye contact with me as they've got their hands behind their back and being loaded into the back of the cop car, and they just shoot me the grin of the century that they are just like, eat it. Like you can't tell me nothing. And that's probably one of my favorite pictures of all time. The lighting is terrible. So it's black and white for a reason. You know how that goes.
Uh-huh.
But I have it printed and I have it on my wall. And I know a lot of other people do too. It's just like, I don't know, the tenacity of it all.
Yeah, when I think of your photos, that one definitely comes to mind pretty much right away as one that stands out for sure.
Mhm.
Just such a moment.
Mhm.
You just were in the right place and ready, or not
All
quite ready, but ready enough.
made it work.
That's awesome. So, moving away from protests a little bit, like I mentioned at the beginning, that you've been part of the hardcore scene, the music scene for quite a while, I guess. I don't know exactly how long, but longer than most people stay involved. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in that? Like when and how did you get involved in the hardcore scene? And what about it did you or do you find attractive? And at the same time, what are some issues you have with that scene? Because pretty much anyone who's involved in the scene certainly has a list of issues. And for people that may not be familiar with it, what are maybe some bands that have inspired you most or that you would tell people might be good to listen to?
Sure. Oh man. So I have been involved in like hardcore since I would say about 2004, 2005, which
Okay.
that would have made me, for people who are good at math, around 15.
Exactly the age I got involved, yeah. A
And
generation earlier, but yeah.
yeah, well, it's a really important, pivotal time, really formative time. And I've been straight edge for over 20 years at this point. So I don't, no drugs, no smoking, no alcohol. I've just been sober since I was about 14 years old, which is a feat, honestly, because I've been over 21 for a long time now. So, but I think that
But
like,
so that's the part of the hardcore scene you've been most involved with has been sort of the straight edge
yeah,
and adjacent kind of scene.
for sure. Yeah. And I grew up in Cleveland. So Cleveland has like really, really heavy, like deep roots with the straight edge community. So with bands like Confront, so that's how this is going to be so embarrassing, Brad. So how I got into hardcore specifically and how I found out about straight edge, you're allowed to make fun of me, is
I never would. I would never.
I have always really liked pop punk music, and I was really big into pop punk music at the time. And Good Charlotte has a line in one of their songs that says, "I'm just a minor threat, so pay no mind." And, I was on the internet, as one would be at
Hmm.
that time, like looking into what that meant. And that took me to Minor Threat. And that took me to Bad Brains and Black Flag and like all of that. I learned about straight edge through that journey. Those aren't my favorite bands by any means. That kind of like DC punk hardcore sound has not really always been my favorite. I really,
Oh, we're stopping this interview now. Fuck that. Nope. You're done. Canceled. No, just
out of
kidding.
here. I Yeah, fake fan. I somehow ended up with a Victory Records sampler and heard like Martyr AD, and Hoods and like these kind of like heavier bands, which is where I kind of really find most of the music that I like. I always joke that I really like to like turn my brain off and not think about it, which is not true because the lyrics are always, most of the time, they're meaningful, or there's something really to resonate with politically there. But I ended up on the Northeast Ohio hardcore message board at 15, 16. What a dangerous place to be. Oh my goodness. I would not recommend that to anybody. But
Yeah.
I met some like awesome women, and one of them picked me up at my mom's house and took me to my first VFW show. And I saw some local bands play. And so this would have been Cleveland in like 20 or 2005, 2006-ish. So it was Above This Fire and like a metalcore band called Falling Stars Burn Bright. I do not remember who else played, but there was a Poison the Well cover. I do remember that very specifically. And that's just kind of how I got into it. And then, basement shows came and shows in some of the sketchiest areas I've ever been in. Cleveland was really big on doing really dangerous things during shows. I was at a show once where the doors were shut, the lights were turned off, and the fireworks were set. And I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, But that's just, I guess that's a fun part of it. The community aspect of it has always kind of been what's driven me to it,
Hmm.
which ebbs and flows. I think we all know that. That is where I kind of really first felt like I fit in. There was like this sense of belonging growing up. I felt like I was a little weird, a little bit different. And then I realized that all of these people were also weird. And it was like a really, I'm not even going to say it was a welcoming space because that is just outright not true, but it is a space that I felt like I could be myself.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like the bands you were naming, I don't know most of them, which is funny because I was involved in the music scene like I don't know how many years, a bunch of years before that, and then pretty much stopped going to any shows at all for decades until like COVID was when I was like, I need to go back to shows with my camera because now I know what I'm doing. Whereas I took some photos back in the day, just like pressing the button, see what happens. But so yeah, I've gotten back into going shows, but I missed a whole bunch. And I think like there are some bands that, and I think this is something that maybe will tie us back to Watch Me Rise. But yeah, what are some of your favorite bands that from like when you were getting involved in the hardcore scene or even now?
Yeah. I could talk about Have Heart for forever. That band has meant the absolute world to me. They were big at the time, around 2005, 2006. So that's when I would have been graduating high school. And it's a complicated time in, a young person's life. They had a lot of songs about like resilience and depression and fitting in and finding your way. And that just really resonated with me. The songs about complicated relationships with your father, that type of stuff. And they have a song called Watch Me Rise. So we'll just dive right into that because I know that's coming. They've got a song called Watch Me Rise, and it's basically just about depression and how society wants us to feel like we can't be anything more than our depression. And they have an album called The Things We Carry.
Hmm.
And it opens with a song called Watch Me Sink, and it ends with a song called Watch Me Rise. And the song is about depression, being stuck, being beat down, but ultimately struggling through it. And it builds. There's just like this lull in the song where it kind of dies down, but then you hear the music start to build up again. And it's super emotional for me at least. But the music's building and you can hear in the background, and he is saying, I'd rather die on my feet. He's repeating this. I'd rather die on my feet. I'd rather die on my feet. And then it like builds into I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees, which I can't listen to this day without feel like I have goosebumps right now. I just have so many memories attached to this song, maybe in a way that is probably not healthy, but feels like this is the release. This is what it's about. And so it's just about overcoming that feeling of being stuck. I'd rather die on my knees or die on my feet than live on my knees so you can watch me rise. That's how it ends. And I have like really, really positive memories attached to this song. But also, I don't know, maybe you've not had this experience. I've also had the memories of standing in the middle of a crowd full of people who are seeing this band who was so formative in their lives. And you just look around and everybody is like super emotional. Like the toughest people you've ever seen are just like crying, crying in the pit, Brad. They're crying. This band has broken up and done like reunion shows at least twice in the past 20 years.
Hmm.
And I got to see them 2 times that they did that. the first time I got to see them in 2019, my uncle died that morning. And
Wow.
he was like a father figure to me. So that was just like the whole set was really emotional, was just really, and I didn't tell any of my friends that it had happened. We were at a fest. I didn't want to, kind of like bring that on anybody. And we were coming to see one of our favorite bands together. But to be able to have that release on that day, just to spend all that energy with a bunch of people around me who were just like we were all there for the same reason, like all living in the same moment, as cheesy as that sounds, but we were all like feeling the same thing, was so helpful
Yeah.
in experiencing and kind of like processing that grief. And then they reunited again last year at a fest in Detroit. And so my partner and I and some of our friends went to that fest, and they played the song last because that's what they do. And at the end of the song, there's this part that's building, that I've mentioned, and everybody is just climbing on stage. Just everybody is swarming the stage. And I have a friend on stage, and she pulls me up, and like my shoe is coming off, and it's like a mess. It is borderline scary, just how like the crowd is moving and you can't breathe, but everybody is getting on stage. And the part builds where he's singing, "I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees, so you can watch me rise." And everybody's just screaming it together. And this is so appropriate for a photography podcast because there were pictures that came out of it afterwards.
Hmm.
Somebody captured the pileup from the balcony. I believe her name is Heather Edge, Heather X Edge on Instagram. She captured the shot from the balcony, and I can see myself in it.
Oh, wow.
I can see myself in it. And I don't think I've ever been in a crowd shot ever, Brad, but to be in a crowd shot of this song that means so much to me, we, I'm so grateful that she had them for sale and we printed it, and it's like the background on my phone, and it's sitting in our apartment. And that's one of those things that will just never leave. It'll never leave.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, it sounds definitely familiar from however many years earlier. I mean, that was sort of the essence of the mid to late 80s DC scene, was that where the word emo came from, right? Was bands like Rites of Spring, who I missed, but I moved there right, soon after they broke up. But and then the early Fugazi shows had a very similar vibe, although that there was sort of a turn against slam dancing in DC at that point, and pits and stage diving and all that. But it was that same sort of packed in, the whole crowd. Yeah, definitely can relate.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear a little more about the relationship, like how you developed your politics. Like, was it through music? Because I don't know, like for me with like the hardcore scene, like there's sort of hyper introspective individual, very personal stuff, which, not to diss that. Some of my favorite bands are bands that were hyper introspective, but also then there's like sort of stereotypical political, maybe crust punk kind of stuff that's just over the top. Like back then it was like, fuck Reagan, fuck nuclear war, but didn't go much deeper. But that's how I developed my politics really initially, was from those records and then reading more and learning more. Is that how you developed your politics? Was it in the music scene or was it separate?
I would say maybe somewhat. I think I wasn't listening to a lot of political music. Like the bands that I wasn't were listening to were not, they did not have a political message, but they did have a message about community, and they did have a message about friendship and just caring for people. And I think that's where I developed that. I come from a working class family in Cleveland. My grandfather was a truck driver. My dad was a mechanic. My mom has worked a variety of random kind of like jobs, office jobs, and now she's working in a shipping warehouse. And I don't know, there's like a complicated, relationship that my family has with their working class background. That's not something that they're necessarily proud of, which to me is very unfortunate. But we were kind of taught to be a little bit self-hating, and we were kind of taught to be very individualistic, which I didn't grow up that way, but there was a point in my life where that switched, and I don't exactly know when it was.
Hmm.
And so finding this music, I like desperately wanted to belong to something so bad. I just wanted to
Yeah.
belong to something and to have like a group of friends that would care about me and look out for me. there was like this deep need to be like looked out for, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe something I should process with my therapist and not hardcore music, but and I found it in the music.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find my politics in the music. I found that caring about each other type thing. It took me a long time to find my politics because I really wasn't forced to, if that makes sense. I didn't have to. I lived in like a little bubble where I didn't have to find my politics for a long time. I went to Kent State University, and school's got a very rich history of protest and
Yeah.
anti-imperialist organizing, and I did none of that. I did none of that on campus. I
Mm-hmm.
was also an older student and didn't live on campus, so I missed out on kind of those opportunities. But it wasn't until 2015. It wasn't until the murder of, I believe it was Eric Garner, when I was living in New York, that I hit the streets for the first time. Like it wasn't until then that I was like, what am I doing? And it was so much longer before I found like some place to be, and I just didn't know how to get connected. I was living in a couple of different states, so that doesn't help, but it took me so much longer to find somewhere to plug in. And I learned about organizing in my politics from organizing with other people. I did not grow up with good politics by any means. I did not. I was well into my late 20s, early 30s before I developed anything coherent.
That's interesting. Even yeah, it's just for me, the music scene sort of and music and politics sort of developed at the same time. And yeah, it's interesting hearing your story being a little different in that sense.
Yeah, that's the DC punk though. Like I grew up with a lot of One Life Crew was big when I was growing up, and that's just not something that is like the opposite of good politics for anything. Are you familiar?
No.
Okay, don't look it up. It's would not recommend it. But like if they are, when you talk about Cleveland hardcore, people are going to talk about One Life Crew, and it's just the most bigoted, like disgusting nonsense. But I grew up like with integrity and ringworm, and there's a good chance I was just missing the politics from it, that I just wasn't absorbing it in the same way.
Mm-hmm. I love learning more about, that you mentioned Have Heart being such a formative band for you. Like I'd never heard of them until like the last few years, from you and others and Title Fight and bands like that and going back and discovering all this stuff. And now like, my absolute favorite band that still exists in the world is Touche Amore, who I had never even heard of till, a few years ago. And now I'm like, oh my God, all this stuff was happening. And I actually found out that they played a show at Triple Rock one night when I was like right there on the West Bank and actually went into Triple Rock, like into the bar area when they were playing. And I had no idea until years later that I could have actually seen them and
Wow.
discovered them earlier, but I didn't. Anyway, neither here nor there. But yeah, it's just interesting how, to me, the interaction between music and politics and how, yeah, within the hardcore scene, there's so many different parts of it, right? Where there are bands that have very explicit politics, bands that have sort of, they're on the right side, but they don't sing about it a lot. And then there's like the just outright reactionary stuff, like you were talking about.
Right. And then also I think as the listener, you have to be open to it. Like if you're just there because you want to be a part of like a music scene, you're not going to absorb anything else. And I think that's what was it for me for a long time.
Mm.
And I know you've talked about taking a break and not being around or going to shows for a period. I also did the same thing. I had a very complicated relationship with the Cleveland scene, and nothing really changes. I think that now we think things as far as misogyny and homophobia and transphobia, we think those things don't exist in our scene anymore, and that's just not true. You're just not talking to the right people. It's really unfortunate. And so I'm older now, and my priorities have shifted a little bit, and I have found like a political home outside of like the hardcore scene.
Yeah.
And so that's where I get that. Like that's what means more to me right now. What used to feel like my life, like for real, I thought this was my life. I thought this was going to be my everything.
Mm-hmm.
My priorities have shifted, and I still care a lot about it, but I don't put the same kind of emphasis on it because I'm just I'm not getting the same thing out of it, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the interviews that I just recorded but hasn't come out yet for the podcast, we talk about I can't remember if we talked about it in that when we were recording, but the people that I'm on there with are the people that I was doing music scene stuff with at the moment when I sort of had the epiphany that I need to be doing political organizing as my main focus, and I'm not getting everything I need out of the music scene, and sort of parted ways at that point. Not, in a bad way, just like changed my focus a little bit. But I think that's very healthy because expecting a sort of insular music scene to be everything you want to be politically turns out to not be very healthy. And
Exactly. It's not going to meet all your needs. You need
yeah,
to figure that out elsewhere.
yeah. So one thing I've noticed though, when we have been at some of the same shows, I haven't seen you take photos at shows. Did you do that back in the day at all, or do you do that now, or is that something you've thought about, taking pictures at hardcore shows?
I have, back in the day, I have like some pictures I've taken at shows that I just kind of messed around with. But as far as within the past couple of years, no. Have you seen how many photographers are at hardcore shows? I
Yeah, it's definitely oversaturated. Man, I was just in DC at this 40th anniversary for Positive Force DC, where there's a series of benefit shows, and yeah, it was just like the whole front of the stage was just like cameras everywhere and the sides, and so I felt a little self-conscious doing photos there, but I was like, I flew to DC for this. I'm not going to be ashamed to take my pictures.
100%. I mean, I've been to shows where they've had to put up messages beforehand to be like, we've got enough photographers. We don't need any more. But one thing I have noticed,
Yeah,
and I'm
there's
sure,
that One Step Closer show at Pillar. I
yes,
remember that one. Yeah, I was
yes,
like, damn it, I was going to go with my camera.
no more photographers. But people are taking a lot more film. People are taking
Yes,
again. So I think that's really cool.
I love that.
So that's been really fun to see. The resurgence of film has been really fun.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and I really love that. And I haven't brought my film camera out to show, since I've been going back to shows, but I want to do that because that's how I was shooting back in the day and just got some good shots and a lot of bad ones. But it's just, yeah, you have to think so much more because you have a limited number of shots, right? You can't just keep pressing the button and hope something comes out. And yeah.
Yeah. When I started taking pictures again, I took a point and shoot film camera to a garage show that Hostility played. And I have a picture. I don't know how I ended up with this picture of Agnes, but I just put the camera over my head and just hoped for the best and ended up with a really good shot of them doing vocals. And they had it as their profile picture for a while. So that was cute.
Aw, that's awesome. Well, Agnes is a kick-ass singer so it's easy to get good photos. At least I've been lucky to get a couple good ones too with them.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah,
They're very photogenic. It's
yeah,
not.
that's awesome. So yeah, we mentioned Watch Me Rise a little bit before, and why don't we talk a little bit more about that? So sometime in the last couple of years, you started using Watch Me Rise for your photography, sort of, I don't know, branding or persona or whatever you want to call it, with a super cool logo. I'd love to hear, like, did you design that logo? Where'd that come from? And can you just talk about Watch Me Rise in general? What is it, and why did you start it?
Sure. So I don't know why I chose a different name than using my full name for my photos. And I think maybe I had this false sense of that I could be anonymous for a little bit. Like I could just be like, unknown at shows, or at protests. But I show up to protests with a camera that is covered in tiger stripe camo. So there is really no way for me to blend in unless I'm like in the woods.
Right, camo is supposed to blend in, but it's not working.
No, it's not. Everyone says that I look like I'm like taking pictures of birds. But
We have some great bird feeders, and so yeah, I'm definitely doing some bird pictures this summer.
oh,
And hummingbirds, that's the holy grail of bird pictures.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. I would be so jealous if you got a good shot of a hummingbird. But so I just ended up using this I don't know phrase for my photography project, and it stuck. And I asked my sister to draw a logo for me, and so I wanted the logo to be me with a camera. And it's me because I'm wearing camo pants, which I've got a thing for camo. And she drew it in the style of like the old school hardcore flyer hooded figure that was used in a lot of like old school straight edge flyers. And so I wanted the figure to be wearing the hood up, and it's got the hood up with like the blacked out face, but you can see the eyes, and it's got you can see the X, the straight edge X on one hand, and then I'm holding the camera in the other one. And it just turned out really cool. And I was really, really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, I love that logo. It's
Mhm.
definitely props to your sister.
Mhm. I've had people be like, it's you. And I'm like, that was the whole point.
So you basically you started Watch Me Rise as for your photography, right? Like, and so
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you do as Watch Me Rise or that you plan to do?
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to do some pretty cool things. The goal has never really been, it's never to make money because there's no way that I will make money on this. There's no way I will break even on this. I mean, you know that.
Never
Uh,
say never.
okay, fine. Equipment is expensive. Well, the goal for me is to not make money. I will say that. I've gotten to I tabled at May Day, the May Day Festival, and I got to talk to some really cool people, and people bought a lot of prints, and I connected them to organizations that they can work with, and I had a bunch of flyers at my table of actions they could get involved in. People just want to be connected, and they don't really know where to go a lot of the time. And so
Was this
I
at the Powderhorn May Day, like the puppet May Day, or the
Oh,
May Day
so
May International
adjacent.
Workers' Day May Day?
It was the Reverie vegan restaurant was having a block party that
Okay,
was right outside the Powderhorn May Day parade.
got it. Okay.
So people from the parade came to the block party. So it was like really busy and hot, but it was a really good day. And then I also was able to recently table at two Pride festivals and didn't really sell anything there, but I had a lot of really good conversations with people about organizing. And I get a lot of people who thank me for what I'm doing
Hmm.
and just talking about how like powerful my work is. I had a really bad festival where I didn't sell anything, but I did sit there with a notebook and wrote down every nice thing that somebody said to me because that was just so powerful to me. And so on the days that I'm really questioning myself and my abilities, I can pull that out and be like, well, this really touched someone. This made
Yeah.
somebody feel something. This made somebody feel connected to something. So my goal really with Watch Me Rise is just to like share these images, help tell these stories, humanize the struggle and kind of allow people to see themselves reflected in it. And so far it's been a really fun adventure. And I know that one of the kind of like biggest things that I've done is you and I collabed on a fundraiser for the Lucy Parsons Center in South Minneapolis, and
Yeah.
we did holiday portraits and we raised over $1,000 for the community center in South Minneapolis. So that was really fun.
Yeah, that was awesome. Definitely should do more things like that.
Mhm.
You mentioned selling prints at one of the things that you went to. You have you found that people are interested in prints and are you selling prints like you thought you would? I just asked because when I first started, I first did a photography website. Oh, I'm going to put all these things up and people will just start buying tons of prints that'll, and I pretty quickly realized nobody buys prints. Not nobody, but not nearly what I sort of expected. Yeah, so that's interesting that people are buying your prints. What kind of prints were people buying?
So they'll mostly buy I'll do a 4x6 matted to 5x7. And that's a really good size for people. And they're mostly buying a lot of what people have purchased have been Pride related prints. So I have some prints from
Hmm.
Taking Back Pride, the big one that's actually filmed. One of the first pictures I took when started taking pictures again. It's like the big banner from the beginning of the march. And then I have one from Taking Back Pride last year. That's a big hit. It's somebody in the crowd had a sign that said God is trans. And that just is, people love that one. People love that one. I sold that print to a trans minister and they were just so excited to
Oh,
be able
that's
to put that
amazing.
in their office. And then recently people have been really interested in some of the MMIWR work that I've done at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives March. And then there's a Chingal Migra poster or sign from the protest that Mirac did I think it was like the winter, sometime in the winter. It was sunny, so it was confusing, but there's a Chingal Migra one that people have been purchasing because they really just
So
they
you're just sort of guessing, like you're like, I think people like this. I'll print a bunch of them and see what happens. And
Mhm.
okay,
It depends on the audience because
yeah,
at May Day, I was selling, I have that print of the construction worker under the Lake Street Bridge that when
Yes.
I walked by with the May Day protest, he put his fist in the air. I,
Yes.
I love that one. People were buying that one. People love that one. People also really love the one of everybody with the crossed arms in front of the University of Minnesota encampment
Hmm.
protecting students.
Hmm.
Um, but mostly people have been buying the Pride ones.
Hmm.
And it depends because sometimes, sometimes you'll get a more liberal art audience and they're going to want more of I have a print from International Women's Day where there is a young girl sitting on her dad's shoulders and she's holding a sign and it says stand together and she is like mid scream
Mm.
and she just looks so cool. And that one, people really love that one too, which I don't blame them. Like if I was that little girl, I would be so proud of myself. It's about kind of knowing your audience, and I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah, I've done, I think, two events where I tabled and had tried to sell prints, and yeah, it's just such a shot in the dark, and you have to spend all this money to make the prints and then hope that they sell. And yeah, I want to try it again. Like, I don't know. I can't remember. Did you have a table at the holiday sale at New City Center? Yeah, you did. And
Mhm.
um and Kim DeFranco did that one year too. Maybe I need to do that next time.
I think you do. I did really well.
That's awesome. So another thing that just before we were talking, just looked back again at your website, the Watch Me Rise website, and it sort of reminded me of something that in a recent interview I did with Brooke Anderson out in the Bay Area, she talked about one of the reasons to even do this, right? Because why do we bother to lug this heavy camera, expensive gear to protest after protest when everybody there has a camera in their pocket and takes some pictures while they're there? So what's the point, you know? And one thing she talked about was archiving movement history, like keeping it all together in a coherent place where people can come to you then at some point if, oh, do you have a picture from this movement or this protest or of this person? And you have that archive sort of maintained by somebody who's from the movement. And you're developing that with your website. And I think that's a really important thing to have as well. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's not really asking a question. It's
No, I listened to that part of the episode and was like, should I put like a little watermark on my pictures so people know where to come back to if they want, you know what I mean? I listened to that and I was like, ooh, maybe. I haven't gotten there yet though.
yeah, the whole watermarking debate, like I'm anti-watermark. Not like militant anti-watermark, like fuck people who do that, but like, yeah, it's just so easy for people to edit that off at this point. It's kind of like, what's the point? And
Right.
so I haven't really ever done it on my photos, but yeah, a lot of people do. And the reason she said does make some sense for sure. So people
It
can
totally
track
makes
back.
sense.
So that people who are honest and want to give credit to the photographer can find it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
So, who are some photographers that inspire you, whether it could be famous people or people you know or people you follow on Instagram?
Are you gonna be embarrassed if I say you?
Yes. Don't
But
say me. No,
it's
you
true.
can,
I
you
mean,
can.
I think like you and Kim have always been at protests with cameras and like I that is like really it's really valuable work and people really appreciate that. And I know I've, always asking you about, oh my God, how do you handle this type of lighting and all of this different stuff? And you've always been so helpful and just so accommodating. And I've never felt like a sense of competition within this.
Hmm.
Our movement photographers here. Not that I would ever aspire to have a sense of competition because that's weird, but like it's always like, okay, Brad can't make it. Can you? Okay, Ashley can't make it. Are you going to be there? Like that type of thing.
Hmm.
And that just goes to show like how much people value what we do. But like I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't see you doing it.
I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So no like Ansel Adams or like famous people, photographers. No.
No, I like
How about hardcore photographers? Like, are there any that stand
um
out to you?
oh man. I don't know the names of anybody. I'm so terrible. But there is one like movement photographer that I started following when I made my Instagram and started taking pictures. Their name is Alexa Wilkinson and they're on the East Coast. I don't know if they're in New York City or what, but they go by Framed Unrest on Instagram and they've just been photographing a lot of Palestine work. And one thing that I really appreciate that about them, and also Brooke talked about this when you talked with Brooke recently, was that like it's so clear whose side we're on because there's this like idea, or I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe professional photojournalists have to abide by this neutrality thing, but that's just such nonsense. And like I will never do that. Like you are gonna know who I'm there for. This is for them. This is for us. We're here together. Because like that's the thing too, is my partner always has to remind me, like, you are also an organizer. Like you are also, you know, these people, you organize alongside them. This is your community, and these are the, you know, you're there supporting your community. It's not this type of thing can be so easily exploitative.
Mm,
But it's not when you are also you're also an organizer doing the work.
mhm.
You're not just there as a spectator, you
Yeah.
know. You know that.
Yeah, and like I have been thinking a lot about that question too, just as I'm working on slowly, very slowly behind schedule, putting together a photography book from my photos from the George Floyd uprising and the period after that. Like, how can I put that out without just sort of like being exploitative? And one way I'm trying to do that at least is I doubt it'll make any money, but if it does, I'm going to donate some of the money to the key organizations that are fighting, for families victimized by police brutality, and then I'm interviewing some of the family members and some activists to, have little quotes or little bits of their voices in the as well. So I don't know if that's enough, but it's what I'm going to try.
Absolutely. I mean, you do the same thing that I do, at least I think you do. All of the pictures are free on my website.
Hmm.
You can download, I mean, you can pay if you want to, and some people do, and that's so nice.
I
But
know when I have people pay, I'm like, did you mean to do that? Did you know you can just press
I know,
download and get it for
I
free?
will always like signal that, you know, you don't have to, right? Um, or I will see someone screenshot it and I'm like, you can download the high res, it's free. But it's a repository for people to find photos, and you do it too. Post the whole gallery for free. Like these aren't my photos, these are the people's photos. Like these are your photos. And people use them. They're everywhere. I mean, your photos, my photos, Kim's photos, they're used for flyers all across the movement.
Yeah.
I sometimes will look at something and be like, did I take that? Um, so
That that
mhm.
brings to mind a question in terms of like photographic style and kind of combining that with what gear you shoot with. What would you say is your style, or what are things that if people see a photo, they're like, "Oh, I know who took that," and then relatedly, or maybe not relatedly because it's not the same, but yeah, what you've talked before that you shoot with a Canon camera, like when you're out at protests, what do you like to shoot with?
So I'm always, this is definitely leads into why I think my style is the way it is, because I'm always out there with my 70 to 200 2.8.
Hmm.
She is wrapped in tiger camo and she looks all sorts of wild, but I love her. And then I'm still in the phase of my journey where I'm shooting wide open like all the time. That you can tell it's me because it's going to be close up and it's going to be wide open
Compressed with
and
blurred background, and yeah.
blurred background, like super emotional. And that's at least how people have told me that my work looks to them, because I feel like I haven't really figured out what my style is yet. But when people relay it back to me, they're like, you are really good at kind of that up close emotional
Mm.
aspect of an action, which makes sense because I can't get wide enough to get a like a wide crowd shot. But
What do you have coming up or in store for your photography?
um, oof, not a whole lot other than just showing up wherever. But I'm waiting to hear back about a state art grant that I applied for
Oh
to,
wow.
yeah, to get some new equipment and to work on like a year-long project that would be about movement art and movement photography. And it's like its necessity and importance and its influence. And my goal with that project would be to culminate in like an art show, which would encompass like movement photographers, movement artists. We definitely would have to have Annie from SDS in there, just like showcasing what we've done. So I'm waiting to hear back about that. I don't think I'll hear until like November, but
Okay.
that would be pretty cool.
When you first started mentioning that, I thought you were going to say you submitted something to the state fair fine arts photography thing. I did that once and I didn't get accepted because most don't. But that sounds
I
really cool though.
I did actually submit. So I was in an art show. I submitted the picture of Mira being arrested to an art show at Umbra Arts Gallery,
Hmm.
which is the art gallery connected to Twin Cities Leather
Yep.
in Uptown and
Lake and Lindale.
Lake and Lindale. And that was really cool. So my picture of Mira getting arrested was on the wall with all of like this really awesome queer art. And then I submitted a couple other photos to a journalism contest at the University of Minnesota. Their
Hmm.
journalism school they have like an annual conference and we're having a contest. And I was just like, okay, let me just see. Let me willy-nilly just submit these. And one of my pictures got second, third, and honorable mention in the same category. And it's so funny because all of the pictures that placed were pictures of my friends being arrested on the University of Minnesota's campus. So it felt a little ironic for the university's journalism school to be being like, hey, thumbs up, these are great.
Right? That's cool though. Yeah. So where can people see your photography and follow you online?
Sure. So I am most active on Instagram and my handle is at Watch Me Rise MPLS. And then you can also find my website at watchmerisemPLS.com.
You can support Red Lens Podcast by supporting my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/SiegelPhotos, SIGALPHOTOS, and sign up for a small monthly donation. That will go a long way in helping sustain the podcast and my work as a political photographer. Thank you for checking out and supporting Red Lens Podcast.